Hello, everybody. Thanks for sticking around for this Q&A for Marvelous in the Black Hole, which is playing as part of IFF Boston 2021. I want to bring up our special guest. We've got director Kate Tsang. Hello, Kate.
Hello.
And to moderate the discussion from Vanyaland, we've got Nick Johnston.
Hi, everybody.
Really looking forward to this conversation. So, Nick, I'm going to hand it over.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Kate. I loved Marvelous in the Black Hole when I saw it back at Sundance earlier this year. Just what an utterly heartwarming, magical, I guess, that's the sort of cliche thing to say, I guess, but, magical film that you've made. I did a little research on the film, and I did a little research on your background. I looked up a couple of other interviews you've done in the past, and I found one from, I think, 2016, where you were being interviewed about your short Welcome to Doozy, and you mentioned this film at the end of that when they were asking you about potential other projects. And I was just wondering, how long have you been wanting to tell this story?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first off, thank you so much for watching, everybody. And yeah, I'm so stoked to be here. This film has sort of been in my mind for a couple of years now. I would say that right after So You've Grown Attached was a short I made that came out in 2014. I was already thinking about my next feature, and the thing that sort of like sent me down this path was I was thinking about, like when you make an indie film, especially, it's something that really has to matter a lot to you because the filmmaking process is so long. It's like a journey you have to be prepared to go on for like 5 years probably. And so like something that would really sustain me and be meaningful to me that I could see like 5 years from when I first started it is asking myself, why is it that I do what I do, which is tell stories? And it comes down to one core relationship in my life, and it's my grandfather. So my parents got divorced when I was young, and I was bouncing back and forth between their homes in Northern California and Hong Kong when I was growing up. And it was an incredibly isolating experience, and I was, really sad and depressed. And my grandfather came into my life and was looking after me, and he could see I was struggling. He didn't judge me, just validated me and was the friend I needed at that time. And because of him, like he would tell me stories at night that were these fantastical stories that like made me realize the world could be full of terrible things. But there's hope and beauty to be found if you look for it or if you create it. And that was the seed of this film. And my relationship with my grandfather was the inspiration of Sammy and Margot. And I really wanted to honor that relationship with this film.
Yeah, you can really see that, I think, throughout the film. And one of the things that was, I think, so interesting about that was how you've taken things like from So You've Grown Attached and you've placed them in strategic points throughout this film when it comes to telling those stories. Like when she watches the old folktale on TV and processes it. And I was just wondering, how would you say that you learned like sort of to craft your aesthetic from then on? Because there's a great lo-fi nature that flows between the two of them.
Yeah, I've always loved animation, and I would consider myself a live action director who utilizes animation. And the things I grew up with had this sort of play between whimsy and live action as well. Like that film that Sammy watches on TV is like a wuxia film that when I lived in Hong Kong, they would play these like amazing magical kung fu films at midnight on the public access channels. And so I grew up loving this kind of lo-fi aesthetic. And I love, early Tim Burton, who was a big influence on me as well. And that sort of wonderment that's also present in a lot of Amblin films where there's that mix of animation and live action. And this film is also born from a place where I had a deep love for these kind of 80s fantastical coming of age films, but I never saw anybody that looked like me. And so this is sort of my version of the film I wish I had when I was younger, like these kinds of lo-fi 80s films in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting too, because there's a your experience in animation has obviously colored a lot of your work and whatnot. Would you say it's been an asset to you to have that, say, when doing in the pre-production process, when you're doing storyboarding or whatnot? Does it help you more than other aspects of live action filmmaking?
I would say I definitely am a very visual thinker, and that probably lends itself to animation in a way. And when I think of ideas, I have a general theme that I'm going for writing wise, but also visually I start collecting things from my past, from like films or whatever I'm reading. And I start making a visual sort of web, and I try to use the story to try to string interesting visual things together. So in a sense, I would say that it is helpful to have this kind of visual mindset in the writing process. And I would say like in the pre-pro stuff, because I know very clearly what I'm going for, I'm able to articulate it better to my crew and the artists working for me.
Absolutely. And speaking of articulating it, I looked up when I was doing research, and I found it absolutely fascinating. You participated in this pitch program with Tribeca, where it was this what is it? The AT&T Presents Untold Stories, which I guess would be sort of like a very public pitch meeting in front of a lot of people. It was live streamed and all that. What was that process like?
It was wild. No film is really, no film is funded this way really, except for through this program, because it's like a Shark Tank style pitch, where this particular award, they pick 5 filmmakers every year to basically, go head to head and pitch for this $1 million fund, and it's incredibly intimidating. It's very scary. But when we won the money, what came with it is you had a premiere date as well if you won this award, because you had a year from the day you won this money to complete the film, which is also like crazy schedule. But at the end of it, you knew this film was going to be seen, which is something that, it's not guaranteed in a lot of indie films that get made. You don't really know the distribution and when you first start it. So I would say that it's a wild way to make a film, but also it came with incredible freedom to, make the movie, because the money was there. We didn't have to worry about it, and we knew it was going to get seen. So it's a really special way to make a film, but not really replicable.
I can imagine
this award.
I mean, they've got a pretty good batting average so far between this and Lucky Grandma. They're 2 for 2 on great films. So, so that's just a fascinating experience, I think, for people to hear about. I think another question I have for you, and this is more on the writing side of things because of your lengthy background in writing for television and for animation, specifically in television. What's harder for you in sitting down and writing? Is it working with other people's characters that they've crafted and whatnot, and having to adhere to things like lore or characterization or anything like that? Or is it inventing your own stuff? Is it getting over the tyranny of the blank page, as they like to say?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, just to clarify, I'm the 3rd iteration of Untold Stories. There's another film, The Nigerian Prince, that was the 1st iteration, which is great. But yeah, I would say writing by yourself, at least for me, is incredibly unfun and painful. But it's necessary work to do what I want to do, and it's incredibly meaningful to me to keep doing it, even though it is like pulling teeth. And I would say writing in a room is a lot more fun because you have a lot more people to lift this load. And I love working with other writers and actually supporting somebody else's vision, like a showrunner. It's really fun for me to do that, to collaborate. So I would say they're different things. And even though the work is not fun to write by myself, I still do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of that vision, I found one interesting tidbit from that same interview that'll lead us into talking a little bit more about the film's production. Back in that interview you did about Welcome to Doosey, you made a statement saying that you wanted Catherine O'Hara for this project, and I assume she probably would have played the part that Rhea Perlman ultimately does in the film. And I was just wondering, so as you began this process and you did that, you had a vision for this character. How did it evolve specifically when you got Rhea and Mia both involved in the project?
Yeah, well, starting with Margot, she's somebody who I wanted to have grit and heart, because Sammy is not a person who's going to respond to somebody who's overly like gushy or like sweet. She needs somebody on her level who understands what she's gone through. And I grew up with Cheers, every week in my house. My mom was a huge fan. So like Rhea was on my mind when I was thinking about who is somebody who embodies these two traits. And having her, when she said yes to it, it was like an amazing like gift to this film. And casting Mia, we had a casting director who's amazing, Amy Renee. She, combed through hundreds of auditions to narrow it down to these actors that we saw in person, and Mia just came into the room and like blew everybody away. And she was basically the embodiment of Sammy during the audition. So I knew that the chemistry between Mia and Rhea was going to have to be really important. So in order to build that, the first time they ever met was at a magic show. Because I wanted them to experience this like, sense of wonder, or like the world we were about to dive into together first time. And because I mean, like a lot of people don't actually see, I never certainly got to see a magic show in real life until recently, when I was an adult. So, and I don't think Mia had ever seen one either in person. So it was really cool to see them together. And then we also set them up with magic classes. So they really started to form this bond together through doing the actual activities that these characters did. So they were like helping each other through the classes too, like, oh, adjust your hand here or whatnot. So it was really, really cool to see them sort of organically become these characters.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. I guess that's the lo-fi indie movie equivalent of sending an actor to boot camp, for a superhero movie or something. And so here's the question. I think it's a little more abstract and whatnot about Sammy's character in particular. One thing I absolutely loved about this movie was, as you said, you talked about Amblin and that sort of magic, but it's really grounded in this, gritty, but also like incredibly emotionally potent rawness that's at the heart of her character, right? Because she's suffering and in a very honest, but also sort of a very Riot Girl kind of way. And one thing I was really interested in was how do you make a tone like that? I imagine it's somewhat like a magic trick in and of itself, where, how do I put this? Where teenagerhood sort of is like one of those things, I think, that's easy to mock. It's easy to make fun of, in the same way that it's easy to mock and make fun of someone standing on a stage doing magic tricks when you all know it's fake or whatever. But at the exact same time, that is performance. That is all that sort of stuff. And I was wondering, so how do you get into that rawness, that sort of truth, without crossing over into sort of making fun of this person's, emotions?
The way I sort of come or create characters is they're always based on some sort of emotional truth, either about myself or somebody I know. And they're usually somebody I care about. So I'm not trying to make fun of them, but more like understand and, show why they are feeling the way they are feeling. And with Sammy, she's based a lot on, pains I was going through. But at the same time, when I look back at my high school photos or like middle school photos, I look so like awkward and, it's like painful, but that's also very honest. So I wanted to make sure I captured both that kind of duality where it is awkward. You do look kind of like silly when you are acting out like this, but also it comes from a very real place. So yeah, I would say that because I just want it ultimately to have some sort of honesty to it, no matter how silly or like, whimsical things become.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's, I think about that too, about teenagerhood being just this awkward, horrible place to, find yourself in. But it's also like when things feel their most potent, they feel their most real. And I think you do a really good job in sort of the hyper reality of this world, because it's a little, it's emotionally true, but it is a little bit stylistically broad, I think. You could do a really good job, I think, of getting to the heart of it all.
Yeah, and also everything feels like the end of the world at that age. Everything feels like you're like on the cusp of like something big, or like, things are always happening to you. Yeah,
and you're feeling all that stuff for the first time, so of course it's gonna, not have the sort of dullness to it. So one thing I also wanted to ask you was, did you study magic as a kid or anything, or learn any tricks, sleight of hand or anything like that?
I didn't know anything about magic going into the script. I just knew I loved it as this concept for storytelling. So I ended up doing research for the script by taking classes at the Magic Castle. It's like this institution in LA. It's very wacky place, but I love it. But I was like doing this intro to magic class when one of the TAs was like, "Hey, it seems like you're kind of enjoying this thing. Maybe you should think about like continuing with this and like maybe even like auditioning to be a member."
Wow.
And if anything about the Magic Castle, like that audition is incredibly difficult. Professional magicians fail it quite often. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she was like, no, like I will show you. And she introduced me to a bunch of her like female magician friends as well. I ended up meeting this community through this script, and they took me under their wing, taught me their secrets, and for a year basically got me ready for this audition. And thanks to them, I passed. And because of this script, I ended up finding magic and friends and like community, and I wanted to like also showcase that through Margot's friends as well when Sammy meets them.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. It felt like, it didn't feel like you were patronizing the magicians whatsoever. They just seemed like a happy family, which I think is such a big contrast to things like Arrested Development and whatnot, where, they're all just these bunch of buffoons, when, there's a real honesty that these people are performers. And I think that brings me to, I've got basically two left for you. And I think that brings me to probably the most thematically serious question or whatever. And that's, I've noticed that this is sort of an ongoing part of like a new trend of films about magic, where be it that Derek Gabaldo movie that everyone fell in love with on Hulu, or any number of big budget Now You See Me type things. It seems like we've finally started to see magic and the art of performing magic on stage less as sort of a stand-up comedy style performance and as a method of storytelling. And what are your thoughts on that? Do you think this is a good trend for magic? Do you think it's moving towards something that's more ultimately meaningful? And do you think you're a part of that?
I think there's different schools of magic, and it depends on the performer. The kind of magic I'm most drawn to is something that where a trick alludes to something bigger, rather than just this moment of like, I'm going to entertain you. Because the history of magic, it starts back like pre-written word, and it's people gathered around a fire trying to like, decipher the world around them. And it's like using magic as like a sense of, trying to make sense of things with wonder as well. And I love Derek Delgadio's in and of itself. I think
Yes.
it's amazing, and it speaks to the power of like magic as a tool to really reach and touch people the way films can. And that's fascinating to me. I also love a comedy magic routine because I just really love to be entertained. So I think there's room for all the different kinds of magic, as long as you know, the audience it's not mean, I guess. I've seen mean magic. Or like ones that like make you feel stupid.
Yeah.
I've seen that before too. I'm not a fan of that, but I'm definitely a big fan of philosophical magic is what I'm calling it.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the one good thing about being the insult magician, or the magician version of Don Rickles, is at least you can just disappear like that, So but I guess I've just got one question for you left, and that's sort of what, I know this film isn't out to the general public yet. I know that it's sort of gaining momentum. More people are seeing it. You're finally going to have your Tribeca premiere soon. And I imagine that just must feel incredible to finally hit that point, But what projects would you like to make in the future? Would you like to do more? Would you like to perform magic on stage, or would you like to continue directing films, maybe go back into animation? What the future, the possibilities are endless, I guess. But
long-term life goal. I don't know when it's going to happen, but of course I would love to like be able to do a set at the Magic Castle for a week.
Oh yeah.
I think that would be super fun. And I'm currently working on a monster film right now. So I'm excited to keep making the kind of stories I'm, excited about, which are grounded, human, emotionally resonant stories that have some sort of twist to it, like a high concept twist to it. And whether that's animation or live action, indie or studio, that's the path I'm on as a storyteller.
Absolutely. And I will absolutely be excited to watch each one of them as they come out. And so, yeah, I just want to thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
It was awesome talking to you too.
On behalf of the festival, I want to thank you both. Nick, thanks for asking questions. And Kate, thank you for taking the time to talk to our audience. And thanks for sharing your film with us. We appreciate it so much. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and take care.